Would you engage in human mating practices with me? The words hung in the air of the dimly lit lab, as shocking as if Mira had suggested they detonate a neutron bomb in the heart of Galactic Corp's headquarters. David Holmes, a seasoned human engineer, froze in place. His Adosian co-worker's large, expressive eyes bored into him, a swirl of curiosity and trepidation evident in their depths. Mira's iridescent blue scales shimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights, betraying a slight tremor that ran through her alien form. The request was unprecedented. Edosians were notorious for their cultural taboo against interspecies relations. Their complex spore-based reproductive system was a far cry from the physical intimacy of human mating. Yet here was Mira, her voice barely above a whisper, asking to bridge that vast biological divide. As the lab's automated systems began their nightly shutdown sequence, a red glow bathed the room, adding an air of urgency to the already tense atmosphere. David's mind raced, processing the implications of Mira's request. He knew her interest wasn't romantic. Mira was a scientist, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Her research into human biology had revealed significant differences between their species' reproductive methods. To her, this was an opportunity for hands-on learning, a chance to understand humanity on a deeper level. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Earth's recent refusal to share advanced terraforming technology had strained relations with the galactic community. The Adosians, in particular, viewed this decision as selfish, further widening the rift between their species. David weighed his options. Agreeing to Mira's request could potentially improve human-Adosian relations on a personal level. It was a rare opportunity for intimate cultural exchange, a chance to foster understanding between their species. His own curiosity about Adosian physiology tugged at him, urging him to seize this unique moment. Yet the risks were significant. Interspecies fraternization was strongly discouraged at Galactic Corp. If their encounter became public knowledge, the professional ramifications could be severe. David's career, which he had painstakingly built over years, hung in the balance. The political implications loomed even larger. In the current climate of interspecies tension, such an act could be seen as a betrayal by some humans, or as an attempt at manipulation by the Adosians. The delicate balance of galactic diplomacy could shift based on his decision. As the lab's systems continued their shutdown procedure, David realized he was running out of time. Mira stood before him, her scaled form taut with anticipation, awaiting his answer. The weight of two worlds pressed down on his shoulders, demanding a choice. In that moment, David Holmes held more than just his fate in his hands. His decision would ripple across species lines, potentially altering the course of human-Edosian relations. As the last traces of daylight faded from the lab's windows, he prepared to give Mira his answer, fully aware that his next words could change everything. David took a deep breath, steadying himself before responding to Mira's unprecedented request. "I need some time to consider this, Mira. It's not a decision I can make lightly." Mira's scales rippled in understanding. "Of course, David. I appreciate your thoughtfulness." As the days passed, David found himself consumed by the weight of Mira's proposition. The potential consequences loomed large in his mind, overshadowing his work and dominating his thoughts. On the third day, he sought out Dr. James Wilson, the head of xenobiology at Galactic Corp. Dr. Wilson's office was a testament to his decades of research, filled with holographic displays of alien anatomies and shelves lined with rare xenobiological specimens. The middle-aged scientist listened intently as David carefully outlined the situation, omitting names to maintain discretion. "Interspecies intimacy is a complex matter," Dr. Wilson said, leaning back in his chair. "Adosian physiology is fundamentally different from ours. Their reproductive system relies on spores, not physical contact. The cultural implications alone are staggering." David nodded, absorbing the information. "What about the risks, biological compatibility?" Dr. Wilson's expression grew serious. "Physically, there should be no harm, but the diplomatic ramifications could be severe if this became public. The current tensions between our species make this delicate." Armed with Dr. Wilson's insights, David spent another day weighing his options. Curiosity and a desire for greater understanding warred with caution and professional concerns. Finally, he made his decision. The lab was nearly empty when David approached Mira after hours. Her scales shimmered with anticipation as he spoke. "I've given it a lot of thought, Mira. If you're still interested, I'm willing to participate in your research." Mira's eyes widened, a kaleidoscope of colors rippling across her scales. "Truly, I'm grateful, David, and admittedly, somewhat apprehensive." "As am I," David admitted. "We'll need to be discreet. I suggest we meet off-site, somewhere private and secure." They settled on a plan, agreeing to rendezvous at a hotel on a nearby space station known for its privacy policies. David made the arrangements using a false name, taking care to cover his tracks. On the appointed day, David found himself in a nondescript hotel room, heart pounding as he waited for Mira. When she arrived, her usual confident demeanor was replaced by visible nervousness, her scales shifting rapidly between hues. "Let's start slowly," David suggested, pulling out a tablet. "I've prepared some information on human mating practices. We can begin with the theoretical before moving to any practical demonstrations." Mira nodded, her large eyes fixed on the diagrams David displayed. As he explained the intricacies of human reproduction, her initial nervousness gave way to scientific curiosity. She asked probing questions, her analytical mind clearly at work. "The physical nature of human mating is more intense than I anticipated," Mira said, her voice a mix of fascination and apprehension. David noticed her scales beginning to vibrate, a sign he recognized as stress. "We don't have to rush into anything," he assured her. "Let's start with simple contact. May I hold your hand?" Mira hesitated before extending her scaled appendage. David gently took it in his, explaining, "Physical touch is an important part of human intimacy. It helps build trust and connection." The initial contact sent a visible shudder through Mira's body. Her scales retracted slightly, creating a smoother surface where their hands met. "The sensation is alien," she said, her voice filled with wonder, "yet not unpleasant." Slowly, David guided Mira through various forms of non-sexual contact, explaining the significance of each. He demonstrated a hug, showing how humans expressed affection and comfort through full-body contact. Mira's initial stiffness gradually eased as she acclimated to the unfamiliar sensations. As they progressed, David noticed a change in Mira's appearance. A faint glow began to emanate from her scales, growing steadily brighter. "Mira, are you aware that you're illuminating?" Mira looked down at herself in surprise. "This is unexpected. I've never experienced this physiological response before." The glow intensified, casting a soft, ethereal light throughout the room. David stepped back, concern etching his features. "We should pause. This could be a sign of an unforeseen reaction." Mira nodded, her own expression a mix of scientific interest and worry. "Agreed. This is outside the parameters of my research. We need expert input." With shaking hands, David reached for his communication device. "I'm contacting Dr. Wilson. He's the most qualified to advise us on this situation." As the call connected, David and Mira exchanged apprehensive glances. The gentle humming of the hotel room's life support systems seemed to grow louder in the tense silence. They waited, acutely aware that Dr. Wilson's response could have far-reaching consequences beyond their immediate concerns. The bioluminescence continued to pulse, a visual reminder of the uncharted territory they had entered. As they awaited Dr. Wilson's guidance, David and Mira found themselves at a crossroads, uncertain whether they had opened a door to greater understanding between their species or stumbled into a situation with potentially dire diplomatic repercussions. The gentle hum of Dr. Wilson's medical scanner filled the tense silence of the hotel room. David watched anxiously as the xenobiologist methodically examined Mira, her scales still emitting a soft, pulsating glow. The doctor's face remained impassive, betraying no hint of his findings. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Wilson straightened up and addressed them both. "Well, I have good news. The bioluminescence is a harmless byproduct of Mira's body, adapting to human pheromones. In fact, it's quite remarkable." David felt a wave of relief wash over him. "So, there's no danger?" "None at all. Dr. Wilson confirmed, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. This reaction actually indicates a higher level of biological compatibility between humans and Adotians than we previously thought possible. It's fascinating, really. Mira's large eyes blinked rapidly, her scales shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors. Does this mean we can continue our experiment? Dr. Wilson nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You have my clearance to proceed. However, I advise caution and strongly recommend documenting the process. This could be groundbreaking for interspecies studies. As Dr. Wilson packed up his equipment and left, David turned to Mira. The alien's bioluminescence had dimmed slightly, but still cast a soft, ethereal glow around her form. Are you still comfortable with this, Mira? She nodded, her scales rippling with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Yes, I am. Shall we begin with a human custom I've read about? I believe it's called kissing. David stepped closer, his heart rate increasing. That's right. It's usually how humans start intimate encounters. Are you ready? Mira's scales bristled slightly as David's face approached hers. The moment their lips met, she stiffened, her eyes wide with shock. David pulled back immediately. Are you all right? The sensation is intense, Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. But not unpleasant. Perhaps we could try again. This time, as their lips connected, Mira's initial discomfort gave way to curiosity. Her scales began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with her quickening heartbeat. David gently placed his hands on her shoulders, marveling at the way her scales seemed to soften beneath his touch. As they deepened the kiss, Mira's bioluminescence intensified, bathing the room in a soft, pulsating light. The patterns of light shifted and changed, seeming to reflect her emotional state. David found himself equally fascinated by Mira's alien physiology, particularly the way her scales became more pliable and sensitive as her arousal increased. Breaking the kiss, Mira's eyes were wide with wonder. That was extraordinary. The physical sensations are unlike anything in Adosian culture. What's next? Over the next few hours, David guided Mira through various aspects of human sexuality. They discovered that many human erogenous zones had analogous, sensitive areas on Mira's Adosian body. Each new touch, each exploration, elicited intricate patterns of light across Mira's scales. When Mira experienced her first human-style orgasm, her bioluminescence flared brilliantly, temporarily blinding them both. As the intensity faded, Mira lay trembling, her scales rippling with aftershocks. By the spores, she gasped, her voice filled with awe. Is it always like that for humans? David chuckled softly. It can be, yes, though I have to admit the light show was a new experience for me too. As they lay together in the aftermath, Mira turned to David, her expression serious. I never imagined the emotional component would be so significant. Adosian reproduction is efficient, but it lacks this level of connection. It's making me reevaluate much of what I thought I knew about intimacy. Their conversation delved deep into the nature of intimacy in both human and Adosian cultures. David found himself gaining new insights into Adosian society, while Mira's perspective on human relationships was fundamentally altered. As the night wore on, they made plans to meet again, both eager to further explore this new dimension of interspecies relations. Neither of them noticed the small, blinking light on the hotel room's environmental control panel, indicating that the room's energy signature had been flagged for review. As they prepared to leave, David felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. They had ventured into uncharted territory, both personally and scientifically. The implications of their encounter stretched far beyond the confines of this hotel room. Same time next week? Mira asked, her scales shimmering with a mix of contentment and anticipation. David nodded, a smile playing on his lips. I'm looking forward to it. We've only scratched the surface of what we can learn from each other. As they parted ways in the hotel corridor, neither David nor Mira was aware of the data packet already making its way through GalactiCorp's secure channels. Their unprecedented interspecies encounter, invisibly recorded by the hotel's security systems, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would reshape their lives and potentially alter the course of human-Edosian relations. David stepped into the elevator, his mind already racing with possibilities for their next encounter. As the doors closed, he failed to notice the subtle increase in security drones patrolling the hotel's corridors. The wheels of bureaucracy and interstellar politics had begun to turn, their momentum building towards a confrontation that would test the boundaries of both law and love in the vast expanse of the galactic community. The soft chime of David's alarm pierced the morning silence, rousing him from a fitful sleep. As consciousness returned, the events of the previous night flooded back. The hotel room, Mira's bioluminescent glow, the intimate exploration of their alien physiologies. A mix of exhilaration and apprehension washed over him as he prepared for work. At Galactic Corp's gleaming headquarters, David's attempts at normalcy felt hollow. Each interaction with a colleague was tinged with the weight of his secret. He found himself scanning faces, wondering if anyone could sense the change in him. Across the building, Mira experienced similar discomfort. Her scales shimmered with scarcely controlled anxiety as she moved through her daily routine. The memory of human touch lingered, a phantom sensation that both thrilled and unnerved her. Their facade of normalcy shattered when identical messages flashed across their communication devices. Report to Chief Security Officer Stern's office immediately. David's heart raced as he rode the elevator to the executive floor. He found Mira already waiting outside Stern's office. Her scales a muted gray of worry. They exchanged a brief loaded glance before a stern voice called them inside. Marcus Stern cut an imposing figure behind his desk. His close-cropped hair and ramrod-straight posture spoke of his military background. Cold, assessing eyes scanned David and Mira as they took their seats. "I'll get straight to the point," Stern began, his voice clipped. "Last night, our security systems detected an unusual energy signature at the Orbital Oasis Hotel, an energy signature that matches Edosian bioluminescence." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Care to explain?" David opened his mouth to respond, but Mira beat him to it. "Sir, we were conducting an unofficial xenobiological study." "Unofficial and unauthorized," Stern cut in. "Do you have any idea of the potential security breach this represents? The diplomatic nightmare you've potentially unleashed?" Before either could respond, the office door hissed open. In strode a tall, regal Edosian female, her deep purple scales gleaming under the office lights. David recognized her immediately. Ambassador Zixalana. "I demand an explanation," the ambassador's voice rang out, her multifaceted eyes fixed on Mira. "Our intelligence operatives intercepted communications about this incident. Have you forgotten our sacred cultural taboos, Mira? The protocols that govern interspecies interactions?" The room crackled with tension. David watched as Mira's scales rippled with a complex mix of emotions, fear, defiance, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Ambassador," Mira began, her voice steady despite her obvious distress, "with all due respect, our interaction has led to potentially groundbreaking discoveries about our species' compatibility." "Compatibility?" Zixalana hissed, her scales flaring. "You speak of compatibility when you've potentially compromised centuries of careful diplomacy?" A commotion outside the office drew their attention. Through the transparent walls, they could see a crowd gathering. Human and alien employees clustered in groups, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outrage. Stern's communication device buzzed incessantly. "The news is spreading," he growled. "We need to contain this now." As if on cue, Dr. James Wilson burst into the office, datapad in hand. "You need to see this," he said, his eyes alight with scientific fervor. "The data from last night's encounter, it's revolutionary. The implications for interspecies medicine alone are staggering." Stern and Zixalana leaned in, their expressions a mix of skepticism and reluctant interest, as Wilson displayed charts and readouts. David caught fragments of the doctor's excited explanations. Unprecedented cellular resonance. Potential for genetic therapy breakthroughs. The tense atmosphere was abruptly shattered by the arrival of a squad of Earth security forces. Their leader, a grim-faced woman in a crisp uniform, addressed Stern. "By order of the Planetary Defense Council, David Chen is to be placed under house arrest pending investigation into potential compromises of Earth's security. Simultaneously, two Adosian officials entered, their scales a menacing dark green. "Researcher Mira," one intoned, "you are to return to Eidos immediately for re-education and judgment." As David was led away in one direction and Mira in another, their eyes met across the chaos of the office. In that brief moment, a world of unspoken words passed between them. Regret, fear, but also a fierce purpose. They had unlocked something profound, something that transcended the boundaries of their species. Whatever the consequences, there was no going back. The last thing David saw before being escorted into a secure elevator was Dr. Wilson, still gesticulating excitedly to a bemused Stern and a conflicted-looking Zixalana. As the doors closed, cutting him off from the unfolding drama, David couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would reshape not just his life, but the very nature of human-alien relations. In a quiet corner of Galactic Corp's sprawling complex, a woman watched the unfolding chaos with keen interest. Captain Sarah Sullivan of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force saw not a diplomatic disaster, but an opportunity. As she observed David and Mira being led away, a plan began to form in her mind. This incident could be the catalyst for real change in interspecies relations, if handled correctly. Sullivan tapped her communicator, setting in motion a series of carefully chosen messages. As she turned to leave, her eyes met those of Dr. Ilara Voss, a visiting xenobiologist from a rival corporation. The two women exchanged a knowing look, each recognizing the other as a player in the unfolding drama. The stage was set. The consequences of one intimate night were about to ripple across the galaxy, challenging long-held beliefs and pushing the boundaries of what was possible between species. And at the center of it all, separated but united in their shared experience, David and Mira faced an uncertain future. As the elevator descended, David's mind raced with questions and fears about what awaited him. The next few weeks passed in a blur of sterile interrogation rooms and endless questioning. Colonel Marcus Hawthorne, a man whose very presence seemed to suck the warmth from a room, led the Earth's Interspecies Relations Committee with ruthless efficiency. "Mr. Chen," Hawthorne's voice cut through the air like a blade, "explain to me again the exact moment you decided to engage in intimate contact with the Adosian researcher." David suppressed a sigh, his throat raw from hours of repeating the same story. "As I've said, Colonel, it was a mutual decision born out of scientific curiosity and—" "Curiosity?" Hawthorne interrupted, his eyes narrow. "Your curiosity may have compromised decades of careful diplomacy. Did that occur to you?" Before David could respond, the door opened, and a junior officer whispered something in Hawthorne's ear. The colonel's expression darkened. "It seems your Adosian friend is facing similar scrutiny on her homeworld," Hawthorne said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Perhaps that will make you reconsider the gravity of your actions." Millions of light years away, Mira stood before the High Council of Elders on Eidos. The vast chamber, with its swirling bioluminescent patterns on the walls, would normally have filled her with awe. Now, it only intensified her sense of isolation. Matriarch Zaralith, her scales a deep, authoritative purple, fixed Mira with a piercing gaze. "Researcher Mira, you have broken our most sacred laws regarding interspecies contact. What do you have to say in your defense?" Mira's scales flickered with a mix of defiance and fear. "Respected elders, I believe our encounter has led to groundbreaking discoveries about our species' potential for compatibility with—" "Silence!" Zaralith's voice boomed. "Your actions have put our entire species at risk. The consequences of this liaison are yet to be fully understood." As both David and Mira endured their separate ordeals, Dr. James Wilson worked tirelessly in his lab at Galactic Corp. Days blended into nights as he pored over the data from their encounter. It was during one such late-night session that he noticed something extraordinary. "This can't be right," Wilson muttered, rechecking his calculations. His eyes widened as the implications became clear. "By the stars, this changes everything." The next morning, Wilson burst into a meeting of Galactic Corp's board of directors, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled from lack of sleep. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, barely containing his excitement, the data from the Chen-Mira encounter shows more than just a bioluminescent response. It's evidence of a deep physiological change in Adaptability biology. As Wilson explained his findings, the room erupted into a flurry of whispers and exclamations. The potential for medical advancements and improved interspecies relations was staggering. Within hours, news of the discovery leaked to the media. The story spread across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, capturing the imagination of billions. On Earth and Eidos alike, public opinion began to shift. In the streets of New Tokyo, protesters gathered outside the Earth government complex. Their signs bore messages of support for David and Mira. Love knows no species, and science not segregation. On Eidos, in the sprawling bioluminescent gardens of the capital city, young Adosians staged their own demonstrations. Their scales pulsed with patterns of unity and progress as they called for Mira's release and a reevaluation of their species' isolationist policies. Amidst the growing public fervor, Captain Sarah Sullivan of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force saw an opportunity. She arranged a summit between human and Adosian leaders, including the reluctant Colonel Hawthorne and the stern matriarch Zaralith. The negotiations were tense, with centuries of mistrust and cultural differences creating a minefield of potential diplomatic disasters. Sullivan, however, was prepared. "Esteemed leaders," she began, her voice calm but authoritative, "Dr. Wilson's findings represent a turning point in our understanding of interspecies biology. The potential benefits of further research are immeasurable." As Sullivan spoke, David found himself approached by an unexpected visitor in his detention facility. Dr. Alara Voss, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed ambition, offered him a way out. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice low and urgent, "my corporation can secure your release and protect you from prosecution. All we ask in return are the exclusive rights to the research data." David hesitated, torn between his desperation to be free and his loyalty to Galactic Corp and Mira. I need time to think," he stammered. Voss smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. "Of course, but remember, time is a luxury you may not have much of." As David grappled with this moral dilemma, a breakthrough occurred in the diplomatic talks. The Adosian High Council, intrigued by the potential advantages of greater biological compatibility with humans, agreed to release Mira. Earth's authorities, not to be outdone, followed suit. David found himself released into the custody of a newly formed interspecies research task force, led by Captain Sullivan and overseen by a still suspicious Colonel Hawthorne. The day of David and Mira's reunion at the Galactic Corp facility was one of mixed emotions. Joy at seeing each other again, warred with the weight of their new responsibilities and the knowledge that they were now at the center of a galactic revolution in interspecies relations. As they embraced, David whispered, "I never thought I'd see you again." Mira's scales rippled with a complex pattern of emotion. "Nor I you, but now it seems our journey is just beginning." Watching from the shadows, Dr. Voss's eyes narrowed. Her plans to acquire the valuable data had been foiled, but she was far from giving up. As she slipped away to begin formulating a new strategy, the facility's alarms remained silent, unaware of the potential threat in their midst. David and Mira turned to face Dr. Wilson and the assembled task force, ready to begin the next phase of their unprecedented research. The future of human-Adosian relations hung in the balance, with their personal journey now irrevocably intertwined with the fate of two species and the promise of a new era of interstellar cooperation. Cooperation, the promise of a new era hung in the air, electric with possibility. As David and Mira faced the assembled task force, Captain Sullivan stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Mira, welcome to your new home for the foreseeable future. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters in the secure wing." The group moved through a series of sleek white corridors, each doorway requiring multiple levels of biometric authentication. David couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and trepidation. This was no longer just about him and Mira. They were now at the center of a galactic-scale scientific endeavor. Their new living space was a stark contrast to the sterile hallways. A large, open-plan apartment greeted them, filled with a harmonious blend of human and Adosian design elements. One wall was covered in a shimmering, bioluminescent mural that pulsed gently, mimicking the patterns of Mira's homeworld. "This will be your primary residence," Captain Sullivan explained. "The research facilities are just down the hall. Dr. Wilson will brief you on the protocols tomorrow morning." As the door closed behind the captain, David and Mira found themselves alone for the first time since their separation. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. "Mira, David began, but she cut him off with a gentle touch of her scaled hand to his lips. "No words, David. Not yet." Her scales rippled with a complex pattern of blues and greens. "We have much to process." The following weeks settled into a rhythm of rigorous scientific study, interspersed with moments of quiet companionship. Each morning, David and Mira reported to the lab, where Dr. Wilson and his team of human and Adoshan researchers guided them through a series of increasingly intimate experiments. At first, Mira's anxiety was palpable. Her scales would bristle and change color rapidly at the mere suggestion of physical contact. David, recalling their first encounter, approached each interaction with patience and care. "It's okay," he murmured during one session, his hand hovering inches from her arm. "We'll go at your pace." Mira's eyes met his, and she gave a slight nod. Slowly, she extended her arm, allowing David's fingers to brush against her scales. The contact sent a visible ripple across her skin, accompanied by a soft glow. Dr. Wilson, observing from behind a transparent partition, spoke into his recorder. "Day 17, subject. Mira shows decreased stress response to initial contact. Bioluminescent reaction intensity at 30% of baseline." As the days passed, Mira's comfort level grew. Her initial trepidation gave way to curiosity, then to a cautious enthusiasm for their shared discovery. David found himself equally fascinated by the incremental changes in her responses. One evening, as they sat in their shared living space, Mira turned to David with an intensity in her gaze. "I want to try something," she said, her scales pulsing with a new pattern he hadn't seen before. Before David could respond, Mira leaned in and pressed her forehead against his. The contact sent a jolt through him, not unlike a static shock, but pleasant, warm. As they remained connected, David felt a strange sensation, as if his thoughts were expanding beyond the confines of his own mind. Suddenly, the room was bathed in a brilliant, pulsating light. Mira's entire body had ignited with a luminescence far beyond anything they'd seen in the lab. Alarms blared as the facility's sensors overloaded. Dr. Wilson burst into the room, his eyes wide with a mix of concern and scientific excitement. "What happened?" he demanded, already reaching for his datapad. David, still dazed from the experience, could only shake his head. Mira, her scales still glowing faintly, spoke in a voice filled with wonder. "I felt everything, all at once. It was as if our minds touched, just for a moment." Wilson's fingers flew across his datapad. "Incredible. Your neural patterns are showing completely new configurations. It's as if your brain has developed new pathways specifically attuned to human contact." As the research team swarmed around them, taking readings and asking questions, David and Mira exchanged a look of shared understanding. Something had fundamentally changed between them, transcending the bounds of their respective species. In the days that followed, their sessions in the lab took on a new dimension. Each touch, each interaction, seemed to deepen their connection. David found himself attuned to subtle shifts in Mira's bioluminescent patterns, reading her emotions as clearly as if they were written across her scales. Outside the official study sessions, they spent increasing amounts of time together. They explored the cultural database in their living quarters, trading stories about their respective worlds. Mira taught David the intricate art of Adoshan color speech, while he introduced her to the nuances of human facial expressions. One night, as they sat watching a holographic display of Earth's oceans, Mira turned to David. "I never understood before," she said softly, her scales shimmering with a deep, rich blue. "The way humans connect, the depth of it. But now I think I'm beginning to see." David reached out, gently intertwining his fingers with hers. The contact sent a ripple of light cascading across her skin. "And I'm learning to see the world through your eyes," he replied. "It's beautiful." Their moment of quiet intimacy was shattered by a sudden piercing alarm. Red emergency lights bathed the room as Captain Sullivan's voice crackled over the intercom. Security breach detected. All personnel to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. David and Mira exchanged a look of alarm. As they moved to follow the emergency protocols, neither could shake the feeling that their world was about to be turned upside down once again. In the facility's control room, Colonel Hawthorne's face was a mask of iron will as he barked orders to his security team. Lock down all access points. No one gets in or out until we identify the source of this breach. Captain Sullivan, her eyes scanning multiple holographic displays, frowned. Sir, this doesn't look like a physical intrusion. The attack is coming through our data networks. As alarms blared and security personnel scrambled, Dr. Alara Voss watched from the shadows of a nearby corridor, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her plan was in motion, and soon the fruits of David and Mira's groundbreaking research would be hers. In the secure wing, David and Mira found themselves trapped, cut off from the rest of the facility by emergency bulkheads. As they tried to make sense of the chaos, a strange buzzing filled the air. An experimental device in the corner of the lab, previously dormant, sprang to life. The Interspecies communication prototype? Mira gasped, her scales flickering with recognition. Before either of them could react, a wave of energy pulsed from the device, enveloping them both. David felt a sudden, overwhelming rush of sensation. Thoughts, emotions, memories that were not his own flooded his consciousness. In that moment, he was Mira. He felt the weight of Adosian tradition, the fear and exhilaration of breaking taboos, the wonder of discovering a new species. Simultaneously, Mira experienced the full spectrum of human emotion, the intensity of physical desire, the complexity of love, the depth of David's feelings for her. As the psychic link faded, they stared at each other with new eyes. Words seemed inadequate to express the profound understanding they now shared. A voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the moment. David, Mira, can you hear me? It was Dr. Wilson, his tone urgent. We need your help. The hackers are after your research data, and our standard encryption isn't holding. David and Mira exchanged a look of willpower. With their newly gained insights into each other's species, they had a unique advantage. We're on it, Doctor, David replied, already moving towards the nearest computer terminal. Mira joined him, her scales pulsing with a pattern that he now recognized as intense concentration. As they worked in perfect synchronization, combining human ingenuity with Adosian pattern recognition, a new form of encryption began to take shape. It was unlike anything either species had developed before, a hybrid algorithm that drew on the strengths of both races. In the control room, Captain Sullivan watched in amazement as the hacking attempts were systematically blocked and repelled. They did it, she breathed, turning to Colonel Hawthorne. The data is secure. Hawthorne nodded, his expression a mix of relief and suspicion. But who was behind this attack? And why? As the immediate crisis passed, David and Mira found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Their unprecedented psychic experience and the implications of Mira's accelerated adaptation to human intimacy opened up new avenues of research and raised countless questions. Captain Sullivan, recognizing the potential diplomatic significance of these developments, began preparations for a formal presentation to both human and Adosian authorities. The future of interspecies relations hung in the balance, with David and Mira's unique bond at its core. As the facility slowly returned to normal operations, David and Mira retreated to their shared quarters. The events of the day had left them both physically and emotionally drained, yet energized by the possibilities that lay ahead. What happens now? Mira asked, her scales shimmering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. David took her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture now felt. I don't know, he admitted, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As they stood there, united by their shared experiences and the promise of a future neither of them could have imagined, the boundaries between human and Adosian seemed to blur. They were pioneers on the frontier of a new era of interstellar cooperation, their personal journey now irrevocably intertwined with the fate of two species, and the promise of a galaxy forever changed. Changed. They were pioneers on the frontier of a new era of interstellar cooperation, their personal journey now irrevocably intertwined with the fate of two species and the promise of a galaxy forever evolving. As the dust settled from the security breach, the Interspecies Research Task Force redoubled its efforts. Dr. James Wilson, his eyes alight with scientific fervor, gathered his team for an urgent meeting. "What we've witnessed is unprecedented," he said, pacing the sterile conference room. "The psychic link between David and Mira has accelerated her adaptation to human contact far beyond our initial projections. We need to understand the full extent of these changes." Over the next few weeks, David and Mira found themselves subjected to an intensified regimen of tests and experiments. Each day brought new discoveries, pushing the boundaries of their understanding of interspecies compatibility. During one particularly grueling session, Mira lay on an examination table, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. David stood nearby, his presence a calming influence. "We're going to attempt to stimulate your bioluminescent response," Dr. Wilson explained, adjusting a series of complex instruments. "David, if you could place your hand on Mira's arm." As David's fingers made contact with Mira's scales, the effect was immediate and startling. A brilliant pulse of light erupted from her body, bathing the room in a dazzling array of colors. Alarms blared as the surge overloaded the facility's power grid. "Extraordinary," Dr. Wilson breathed, his fingers flying across his datapad. "The energy output is off the charts. And wait, what's this?" As the light faded, a new scent filled the air, subtle, alluring, and unmistakably alien. Dr. Wilson's eyes widened as he analyzed the readings. "Pheromones," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. "Mira's body is producing pheromones that closely mimic human biochemical signatures. This level of compatibility, it's unprecedented." News of these developments spread rapidly, igniting a firestorm of diplomatic tension. In the Adoshan capital, matriarch Zaralith addressed the High Council, her scales pulsing with agitation. "We cannot stand idly by while the very essence of our species is altered," she declared. "We demand full access to all research data immediately." On Earth, Colonel Marcus Hawthorne stood before a panel of stern-faced government officials. "With all due respect, Madam President," he said, his eyes hardened, "releasing this information could compromise global security. The potential applications for human advancement are too great to ignore." As political tensions simmered, David and Mira found solace in each other's company. The lingering effects of their psychic link had opened new avenues of understanding between them. One evening, as they sat in their shared quarters, Mira turned to David, her scales shimmering with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. "David," she said softly, "I've been thinking about human mating practices. I think I'm ready to explore them further." David's heart raced as he gently caressed Mira's cheek. "Are you sure?" he asked, searching her alien eyes for any sign of hesitation. In response, Mira leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. The contact sent a ripple of light cascading across her body, accompanied by a surge of warmth and desire that David felt in every fiber of his being. Their moment of intimacy was shattered by a sudden commotion in the hallway. Alarms blared as security personnel rushed past their door. In the research lab, Dr. Alara Voss, disguised in a maintenance worker's uniform, frantically downloaded data from a secure terminal. Her concentration was broken by a voice from behind her. "Step away from the computer," David commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Voss spun around, her hand reaching for a concealed weapon. In the ensuing struggle, she stumbled backward, crashing into a table laden with experimental equipment. A strange device tumbled to the floor, activating on impact. Across the facility, Mira suddenly doubled over, her body erupting in a blinding flash of light. Captain Sarah Sullivan, monitoring the situation from the control room, watched in horror as power levels throughout the building began to spike dangerously. "Initiate emergency containment protocols," she barked into her communicator. "We need to isolate that energy surge before it overloads the entire grid." As automated systems kicked in, sealing off sections of the facility, David fought his way through closing bulkheads, driven by an instinctive need to reach Mira. Outside, Colonel Hawthorne surveyed the chaos unfolding around the Galactic Corp complex. Military vehicles rumbled into position as panicked staff evacuated the surrounding buildings. "Get me a direct line to the Adosian High Council," he ordered, his face grim. "We need to contain this situation before it escalates into an interstellar incident." Inside the facility, David finally reached Mira's location. The sight that greeted him was both terrifying and beautiful. Mira hovered in the center of the room, her body a swirling vortex of light and energy. Without hesitation, David stepped forward, reaching out to touch her glowing form. As their bodies made contact, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him. Their heartbeats synchronized, their breaths aligned, and slowly the chaotic maelstrom of light began to stabilize. Just as the energy seemed to be coming under control, a massive electromagnetic pulse erupted from their joined forms. In an instant, every electronic device in the vicinity went dark. As the facility plunged into darkness, David and Mira clung to each other, their bodies still emitting a faint pulsating glow. In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching vehicles and the shouts of first responders. David looked into Mira's eyes, seeing in them a reflection of the uncertainty and wonder he felt. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two beings from different worlds, united by a bond that defied explanation. Outside, human and Adosian forces converged on the darkened facility, the future of interspecies relations hanging in the balance. The electromagnetic pulse faded, leaving David and Mira bathed in a soft, pulsating glow. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they became aware of the commotion surrounding them. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the chaos-strewn facility. Footsteps echoed through the corridors, growing louder by the second. David tightened his grip on Mira's hand, feeling the warmth of her scales against his skin. They exchanged a look of purpose, silently agreeing to face whatever came next together. The doors burst open, revealing two distinct groups converging on their position. Colonel Hawthorne led a team of heavily armed human soldiers, their weapons raised and ready. Opposite them, Matriarch Zaralith glided forward, flanked by a contingent of Adosian guards, their scales shimmering with awe-inspiring aggression. "Step away from the alien, David," Colonel Hawthorne commanded, his voice taut with tension. Matriarch Zaralith's scales pulsed with indignation. "Release our sister at once, human," she hissed in her native tongue. The air crackled with tension as both sides faced off, fingers hovering over triggers. David and Mira stood at the epicenter, their joined hands a stark contrast to the hostility surrounding them. In that moment, David felt a surge of clarity. Drawing on the deep understanding of Adosian culture he had gained through his bond with Mira, he took a step forward. When he spoke, it was in flawless Adosian, his words flowing with a lilting grace that caught the matriarch off guard. "Honored matriarch," David began, his voice resonating with respect and sincerity. "What you see before you is not a threat, but a testament to the harmony our species can achieve." As David continued explaining the profound connection he and Mira had developed, Mira turned to address Colonel Hawthorne. Her English was perfect, her voice carrying the warmth and depth of human emotion. "Colonel," she said, her scales shimmering with each word, "the intimacy I've discovered with David has opened my eyes to the beauty of human connection. Our bond transcends physical boundaries, uniting our species in ways we never imagined possible." The impassioned speeches of David and Mira, combined with the visible evidence of their physiological harmony, gave both leaders pause. The weapons lowered slightly as confusion and curiosity replaced hostility. Seizing the moment, Dr. James Wilson stepped forward, his data pad clutched tightly in his hand. "Colonel Matriarch," he addressed them both, "I have something you need to see." With trembling fingers, he pulled up his latest findings, projecting them onto the nearest undamaged screen. The synchronized energy state achieved by David and Mira has resulted in a breakthrough in interspecies communication technology. Look at these readings. The display showed a complex array of data, graphs pulsing with activity that mirrored the gentle glow still emanating from David and Mira. Dr. Wilson's voice grew more excited as he explained, "This could revolutionize diplomacy, medicine, and cultural exchange between our species. The potential applications are staggering. Colonel Hawthorne and Matriarch Zaralith exchange glances, the weight of the moment palpable in the air. After a tense silence, the colonel spoke. "Stand down," he ordered his troops, holstering his own weapon. "Matriarch, I believe we have much to discuss." Zaralith's scales rippled with agreement. "Indeed, Colonel, this situation requires careful consideration." As the immediate threat of violence dissipated, David and Mira felt the energy between them stabilize. Their glow dimmed to a soft luminescence, a visible reminder of their unique bond. In the days that followed, the facility became a hub of frantic activity. Human and Adoshan scientists worked side by side, analyzing the data from David and Mira's synchronization. Diplomats from both species engaged in heated debates, trying to navigate the complex political implications of this new development. David and Mira found themselves at the center of it all, subjected to countless tests and interviews. They shared their experiences openly, hoping that their story could bridge the gap between their peoples. As weeks turned into months, the initial fear and taboo surrounding their relationship began to fade. In its place, a wave of curiosity and openness swept through both human and Adoshan societies. Cultural exchange programs flourished, and collaborative research initiatives sprang up across the galaxy. 6 months after the incident at the facility, David and Mira stood hand in hand before a grand assembly of human and Adoshan dignitaries. The occasion was momentous, the signing of the Human-Adoshan Cooperation Treaty. As they were called forward to be honored for their role in this historic moment, David felt a familiar warmth spreading through his body. He glanced at Mira, seeing the same sensation reflected in her eyes. Their bodies synchronized once more, emitting a soft, harmonious glow that illuminated the grand hall. Gasps of wonder rippled through the audience as the light pulsed in time with their heartbeats. In that moment, it was clear to all present that what they witnessed was more than just a scientific curiosity. It was a symbol of hope, a glimpse of what was possible when two species came together in harmony. As the ceremony concluded, David and Mira slipped away from the crowds, finding a quiet moment alone. They stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling cityscape, a mix of human and Adoshan architecture blending seamlessly under the starlit sky. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Mira asked, her scales shimmering with joy. David pulled her close, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her in his arms. "It's been quite a journey," he replied, his voice soft with emotion. Their lips met in a tender kiss, their bioluminescence creating a dazzling display that outshone the stars themselves. As they parted, David's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You know," he said, a hint of adventure in his voice, "I heard they're looking for ambassadors to lead a mission into unexplored space, a chance to share what we've learned with other alien races." Mira's scales pulsed with enthusiasm. "A new adventure? Count me in." Hand in hand, they turned their gaze to the stars, ready to embark on the next chapter of their extraordinary journey. As they stood there, bathed in the soft glow of their shared energy, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. A living testament to the power of love and understanding across the boundaries of species.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.